and welcome to Your Friend in the Darkness podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Vegano, and I'm so excited to be launching this project of mine today on a very special day. Today is the birthday, or what would have been the third birthday, of my eldest son, Remy, and I hope in some way that he will be a patron to this podcast and also the inspiration behind it. So, a little bit about myself. I'm married. I have 3 children, one in heaven, one earthside, and one in my belly. He's probably coming out within the next 8 to 10 weeks. And yeah, this project has kind of come about through a few different things. I'll probably do another podcast leading you through the ins and outs of how we got here. But yeah, the main things to know about me is that I'm based in regional New South Wales. I like to play the violin, and I have a background in school teaching and inclusive education. And I think the aim of this podcast, I think it's really sort of geared towards women of faith, in particular the Christian faith, and about holding out hope through periods of darkness in our life, which forms us and kind of informs us too, and they're things that we carry with us. And I think the death of my son is going to be my major sorrowful mysteries in life. And yeah, we'll be delving into all kinds of topics. Some of the guests that we have coming up are going to be speaking on things such as postpartum depression and anxiety. And yeah, I'd love to share a bit of my birth story actually with Remy, as today's the day to reflect on it. And yeah, I've done a couple of interviews and news articles about it, but I realized I hadn't really done one for myself. So I'm hoping this is the time to tell the story just from my own perspective and not with any particular pro-life spin or I guess even in the context of my own marriage, like as a couple, but just to share as a woman what this process was like for me and the birth story. We all love a good birth story. So Remy's, I guess it was the pregnancy that just kind of went from bad to worse. I was newlywed and we were blessed to fall pregnant fairly soon after being married. And my husband quickly turned into a carer because I was a spewing. And it was sort of during the COVID era, so I wasn't getting a lot of face-to-face care, and I didn't know what was normal in terms of illness. So it sort of took me by surprise when I had to abandon my studies. I'd sort of enrolled in a research program to eventually get into a PhD. So I was in the middle of that, was teaching, lecturing online, and I had to quit all that gradually. At first, I'm just like, oh, guys, I'm just a little sick. I think I'll turn the corner. But yeah, day by day, I was kind of stuck on the couch and my husband would have to leave me food in an esky. It was all a bit of a sad, tragic painting. Yeah, and I had a phobia of vomiting, which I've now been cured of through a few spewy pregnancies. And I think through this process, though, it taught me that I have to be open to accepting help. And I think that was a theme through this whole pregnancy and this whole birth of Remy. And, you know, things were kind of chugging along. Then eventually, kind of at that landmark scan, here in Australia, we get the morphology scan at 20 weeks, and it's a pretty big it's a pretty comprehensive scan of the baby. And that's when we kind of noticed that this baby was a bit small. And not just a bit small, but like really small. Like they'd been kind of the size of an 18-week baby. And so I was about to head overseas to my brother's wedding. And so they said, you know, maybe just book another scan when you get back. And at this point, I was going to have this, you know, amazing natural birth experience, unmedicated, of course. And we came back and we had to drive a couple of hours to like a bigger hospital. And we just thought, oh yeah, we're just getting a scan done. And so I think I'm about 24 weeks pregnant at this point. And the doctors kind of sat us down and they're like, look, this isn't just a small baby. Like, this is a growth restricted baby and it's been an early onset. And we were sort of then just given three options. We could stay at the hospital, be admitted, and give birth via cesarean. We could abort this child and then have another chance at falling pregnant and me not having scarring and, better chances of fertility. Or we could just wait and see. But this child, if we wait and see, they may pass away before we have a chance. And if we waited to have a natural birth, it may end up being, I guess, like a stillbirth situation. So both my husband and I were in complete shock because we just kind of got on a day trip for the day. He had work the next day, we had no clothes, and we were, 3 hours from home. And it was already, I think, the grace that was pouring out because we just had a moment, like we just found the hospital chapel and we were kind of shocked. We were about to become parents within, a matter of days. It could be today. And just processing everything. And it wasn't what I expected. And I think that's kind of what Remy did for me, is that married life, family life is not what you expect. And I'd sort of built up all these idols in my brain of what that could be. And I think sometimes even in faith, like we put certain things on a pedestal thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to get married, that's the goal. And Remy taught me that it's so much more than that. And so we're in this chapel and we kind of come back, and during that time there was already a specialist meeting, lots of doctors meeting together, and they'd managed to get this case. And the doctors kind of gave us a fourth option, in a sense of, how about you come back in a week? Like, go home, get prepared, and if this baby can survive in utero, we can intervene. And if not, they can also support that part of things too. So we were kind of sent home, and it was really quite, just a devastating moment. Not what I expected. And then there were all these like mystical things happening. There were floods happening on the highway, and I had another check-in with the local hospital, and by that point there was a traveling gynecologist, and he's like, what are you still doing here? Like, you need to go back to the big hospital. They'll look after you there. And he kind of had this, I guess, like even surreal or like a lucid moment. He was, even though it was in the public system, he saw that we were, Christians, and he kind of shared with us. He said, sometimes there's just people that are trying to do the right thing, holy people that face great trials. And he sort of, I think he was just kind of encouraging us. And it kind of set the tone. So we stopped off at a friend's house, and she gave us some holy water and this beautiful little statue of Our Lady of Valiankani, who's known for some healing miracles as well. And she ended up coming with us when Remy was born. And we got to the hospital and we checked in, and kind of like, it felt like I was handing myself in like to jail somehow, because I knew my freedom would then be limited a little. But yeah, there was just a lot happening in the background. Like, my parents had been overseas and there was a petrol crisis happening. This was in 2022. And they managed to find this way back. Because, I was giving birth well ahead of time. So we started this kind of daily process once I was admitted, of scanning the baby in the morning and the night. And it was kind of this unfolding, I guess. So day by day, we'd check how baby was doing, and if there were any markers, then I'd give birth. Yeah, the other thing I'd like to mention is giving birth to me at that point in time. I didn't fully understand what kind of a cesarean I'd be receiving. So it's a special scar and a rare scar. It's a classical cesarean. And to do it so early in the pregnancy with such a small baby had really big implications for our future fertility and future births, I guess, which I'm still living out today and have had to make peace with. But it was really nice because I had a friend who happened to be trained in medicine, but he is an OBGYN, but also wasn't my OBGYN. So I was able to call him and tell him that I really didn't want a cesarean and I really wanted a natural birth. And he sort of explained in no uncertain terms that I'm sure a doctor wouldn't be able to say in their professionalism, but he kind of said, look, you can have your ideal birth or you can have a live child. So then I kind of understood I was going to need to let go of my dream birth and just reframe and refocus it to, this was for the benefit of both of us. And I found out later that had we not saved Remy's life, it would have been very likely that I would have become ill as well in the process. So by saving Remy, he actually saved me too. And I think, yeah, that's just another really beautiful theme with Remy's life, is that he helped all of us in different ways. So the day of his birth came. My parents had just arrived from overseas and started the road trip to get to where we were. And I had all the support. Like, we were in a foreign town, and then my beautiful in-laws had also just gotten a place for us to stay. And, there was no time frame in any of this. Like, we had no idea. Were we going to give birth to a live child? Was he going to survive? Were we going to be there for a whole year? Were we going to be there for hours? Like, there was no certainty whatsoever to this situation. And even the choices that we made, they didn't make any more certainty in a sense, because we still wouldn't know what those outcomes would be. And so yeah, we were in a hospital, and that particular evening there had been a Catholic priest, and he came to visit me. He heard that there was a Catholic in the hospital, and he prayed this beautiful prayer over me about being a mother and about how I had carried this baby for a special amount of time. And then he went away, and then about 20 minutes later he comes back and offers me Holy Communion, which was such, like, it was the perfect preparation for me for what was about to happen, because we would then have a scan that would show that the baby was starting to struggle and that he would need to be born soon. So that started happening, and it was a real whirlwind being prepared for that surgery. There was drips going, extra drips going. I'd already had some preparation needles as well, the steroids to help the baby. Then the magnesium drip was going, the saline was going, catheters were coming in, and cannulas were all up. And yeah, it was a real whirlwind, and the general energy was of concern from the medical team. And I still remember being sort of wheeled in to the theatre, and I was kind of saying, I'm terrified. And I'd started shaking even before any of that, the spinal or things that actually cause shaking were coming in, because it was pure terror that I was experiencing. And but the nurses were so beautiful and compassionate, and they just said, you know what, we're scared too. And we'd be scared. And I had a good reason to be scared. I was giving birth so early. We were going to be doing, something quite invasive to try and save this baby's life. And honestly, it was the most joyful of my moment of my life, though, when Remy came. I had sensed he was going to be a boy, and he was a boy. And that was the first thing I asked my husband. And he kind of like, they wheeled him past really quickly. And I said, you need to go to him and see him. And yeah, he was born at exactly 11:11 p.m. that night. And he was breathing by himself when he came out at 25 weeks and 5 days. And he was perfect. Like, truly, just, I marveled at who this little baby was. He was 390 grams. And I just couldn't believe that he was here and he was alive and that he was with us. And I was just kind of in this big blur. Like, I just had to, then eventually they finished up the operation. You know, you're taken to another space, you're given some icy water. And I was just trying to move my legs as much as I could, because once I could move them, they could wheel me over to go see him and meet him. But it was this big, overwhelming moment to see the big machines he was hooked up to, all of these amazing, I guess, you know, life-saving devices for this little boy. He was so little. Yeah, so I just really marveled at him. I was able to like reach my hand into the humidity crib and touch his foot, but otherwise that was about as much contact as he could handle. I waited 10 days to hold him, then another 22 days after that. And yeah, it was a really special but intense period after giving birth, because I was sort of on the ward, but my baby was in another space. It was COVID. We couldn't, you know, there was quite a few restrictions happening. And somehow it felt like I'd given birth, but I was just staring at this little whiteboard where the nurses put their goals, and they wrote his name in capital letters, and I thought, yes, I've given birth to a concept, because I couldn't quite be with him. And yeah, it was truly like an amazing birth. Like, I think I've been seeing like different birth stories online, and they call them positive birth stories. And I would still consider this birth to be positive. Like, I think as far as emergency cesareans go, it was pretty great. Like, I could stay awake for it. There was enough time. I recovered. It was a tough recovery for a couple of reasons, but you know, there were no real complications, except the catastrophic death of my son. But yeah, I think that's still a positive birth. And I think it's sort of hard when people kind of view his life as a tragedy, because, like, I think to me, it doesn't matter how long someone dies, but the time that they've spent alive here is what's glorious and beautiful. And I'm so confident that he is enjoying eternal life. So there was no tragedy in his life. I think the tragedy is probably from my perspective, you know, but he's actually just lived an awesome life, and it's led to conversions of my close family members. It's led to people wanting to have kids. It's led to people wanting to put their faith in God again, which still baffles me to this day. But yes, it was dark, and it still is dark to walk through it and kind of think about those moments in the hospital, or even sometimes going back to hospitals and hearing those alarms again. It does take me back, but not in a, it's not like particularly traumatic anymore, I don't think. I almost like decided I wanted to train up and become a NICU nurse. That was in the immediate sort of days following Remy's death. But yeah, we definitely do want to make meaning and purpose of what's happened. So that was kind of my birth story. And I think what was really affirming about all that is that I was still a mother. I still gave birth. A cesarean doesn't make you any less of a mother. And he arrived here safely, and it was the best. I would highly recommend, if you ever get the chance to have a baby, to just do it because you learn so much about motherhood, about love, and about fighting for your child. And I think we'll leave this episode for today. I think next time I'd actually like to talk to you a little bit more about Remy's death as well. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.